I stood frozen in the foyer, gripping a tray of lasagna while 50 guests laughed at my son's cruelty. He raised his glass and announced, "To my wife, who is moving out tomorrow." He thought this was a display of power, but he did not know I carried a secret in my purse that would silence this room in 5 seconds flat. I did not come to celebrate. I came to burn his little kingdom to the ground. My name is Margaret Holston, though the nameplate on my desk at Northbridge Civic Trust used to simply read Maggie. I spent 30 years there as a financial administrator, tracking every cent that moved through the municipal accounts. You learn a lot about people by how they handle money, but you learn even more by how they handle silence. At 58 years old, a widow for a decade, I thought I had seen the worst of human nature in audit reports and budget cuts. Then I walked into my son's new house. I adjusted the heavy tray of lasagna in my arms. It was scorching hot against my chest, wrapped in foil that felt grease-slicked under my fingers. In my purse, tucked behind my reading glasses, sat a black and white wedding photo of Evan and Rowan from 5 years ago, framed in sterling silver. Beside it was an envelope containing a check for $5,000. I had debated that check for 3 sleepless nights. It was stripped from my emergency medical fund, but Evan had hinted heavily about closing costs and hidden fees. I was a mother. I always caved when it came to his comfort. Larkspur Ridge, Colorado, was one of those new developments that smelled like wet sod and aggressive wealth. The houses were grey cubes of glass and steel, imposing and utterly soulless. I parked my 10-year-old sedan between a Porsche and a Range Rover. The air up here was thin and bit at my exposed skin. It felt cold, even for late autumn. I navigated the slate walkway and nudged the front door open with my hip. The noise hit me first. Chatter. The sound of ice hitting crystal. Jazz music that sounded like it was curated by an algorithm. Evan stood in the center of the foyer under a chandelier that looked like a jagged explosion of glass. He wore a charcoal suit that I knew cost more than the car I drove. He looked up, saw me, and his expression did not soften. There was no warmth, no hug. He just pointed a manicured finger toward the back of the house. "Kitchen is through the archway. Mom, just find a spot for that," he said, his voice flat. He turned his back immediately to laugh at something a man in a navy blazer said. I stood there for a moment, the lasagna heavy in my hands, feeling less like a mother and more like a catering service that had arrived 5 minutes late. I moved through the crowd, dodging elbows and expensive perfumes. I found Rowan near the massive kitchen island. She was slicing limes, her movements mechanical and jerky. Rowan was usually vibrant, the kind of woman who laughed with her whole body. Today, she looked like a ghost haunting her own kitchen. Her skin was pale, and the rims of her eyes were raw and red. "Hi, honey?" I said softly, placing the tray on the counter. Rowan flinched. She looked at me, then immediately down at the limes. "Oh. Hi. Maggie. I didn't think you were coming," she whispered. Her voice was brittle, like dry leaves. "Evan invited me," I said, frowning. "Are you all right? I'm fine. Just allergies, the paint fumes," she stammered, slicing a lime so hard the knife clattered against the marble. I scanned the room. It was packed with strangers. I recognized the realtor, flashing a blinding white smile near the wine fridge. There was Evan's college friend, who was now a corporate lawyer. And holding court near the fireplace was Derek Slate. I knew him by reputation only. He was an investor. the kind of man who spoke loudly about leverage and capital. He caught my eye and gave a dismissive nod, the way one acknowledges a piece of unwanted furniture. The music dipped. Evan grabbed a silver spoon and tapped his champagne flute. The sharp ringing sound cut through the chatter. The room went quiet. Evan beamed, his face flushed with expensive scotch and adrenaline. He walked over and wrapped an arm around Rowan's waist. She stiffened. I saw it clearly. It was subtle, but she turned to stone under his touch. "Everyone! Listen up!" Evan shouted, his voice booming off the high ceilings. "I want to thank you all for coming to warm up our new place. It's been a long road to get here." He looked down at Rowan. The room leaned in, expecting a declaration of love or a sentimental speech about their future, and a special toast. Evan grinned, raising his glass high. "To my beautiful wife, who is moving out tomorrow." The silence that followed was heavy and instant. Then, a few people chuckled nervously, thinking it was a dark, dry joke. But Evan did not laugh. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes gleaming with a cold malice. I looked at Rowan. She was not laughing. She was staring straight ahead, her face completely drained of blood. Her hand, resting on the cold marble countertop, was shaking so violently that her diamond ring clicked against the stone. It was a rhythmic, terrified sound. This was not a joke. This was a public execution. I felt bile rise in my throat. I stepped back, needing air, and bumped into a small console table by the entrance where a printed guest list lay next to a vase of lilies. I looked down at it, seeking a distraction from the horror unfolding in the living room. The list was alphabetized and printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock. Anderson, Baker, Davis, Holston, Evan, Slate, Derek. I ran my finger down the H section. Holston, Evan. My finger stopped. There was no Holston. Margaret. My name had been scribbled in blue ballpoint pen at the very bottom of the page, underneath the notes for the cleaning crew. I realized then why the invite had felt vague. I was not a guest. I was a last-minute addition, a prop brought in to make this house look like a family home before he tore it apart. The silence in the room following Evan's toast was suffocating. But for me, it was filled with the ghosts of checks I had written and sacrifices I had made. I looked at my son, standing there in his bespoke suit, and I did not see a successful man. I saw the 22-year-old boy who had maxed out 3 credit cards trying to impress friends in Miami. I saw the young man who had begged me to co-sign his first apartment lease because his credit score was in the low 500s. I had paid off $12,000 of his consumer debt just so he could start his adult life at 0 instead of in the negative. My eyes drifted to the Rolex on his wrist. It was likely a gift to himself, bought with the same arrogance that led him to sell my late husband's vintage sedan. I had loved that car. It was the last thing I had of Frank. But 5 years ago, Evan had come to me with wet eyes and trembling hands, needing a down payment for his first condo. "Mom, please." He had stammered then, clutching my hands. "I promise. I swear on Dad's grave I will pay you back every cent. I just need a start." I had sold the car for $28,000 and handed him the check. He had hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. That boy was gone. In his place stood a man who treated me not as a mother, but as a renewable resource, a line of credit that never required repayment. Over the years, the dynamic had shifted subtly. The calls asking, "How are you?" became texts asking, Can you transfer 200 until Friday? Rowan had tried to bridge the gap. I remembered the text messages she sent me late at night. Evan is just stressed with work. He loves you, she would write, or I am sorry he missed Thanksgiving. He feels terrible. I had dismissed them as normal friction, the growing pains of a young marriage. I was a fool. She was apologizing for a narcissist. A burst of loud laughter snapped me back to the present. Derek Slate was clapping Evan on the shoulder. Derek was the kind of man who wore sunglasses indoors and spoke in buzzwords. He was the one who had introduced Evan to high-risk, high-reward investing. Derek wandered past me, holding a scotch. Great party. "Mom?" he said, winking. "Evan's really leveled up." Huh. He called me Mom with a casual disrespect that made my skin crawl. I watched them huddle together near the fireplace. I moved closer, feigning interest in a piece of abstract art on the wall, straining my ears to hear over the jazz music. "Totally clean break," Evan was saying, his voice low but carrying the weight of triumph. "By tomorrow night, the locks are changed. No more nagging. No more questions about where the money goes. I'll finally have some peace in my own house." My stomach churned. He spoke about his wife as if she were a defective appliance he was discarding. I turned my head and saw Rowan sitting alone on a velvet ottoman in the corner. She was staring at her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. I moved toward her, intending to offer a napkin or a glass of water, anything to break her isolation. As I approached, I glanced down at her screen. It was an email. The subject line was bold and black against the white background vacate notice draft. Legal review complete. She wasn't just leaving, she was being evicted. I stepped back, my mind racing. How was this possible? This house in Larkspur Ridge cost at least $1.2 million. Evan's income was good, but not that good. Not with his spending habits. Banks do not lend that kind of money to someone with his debt-to-income ratio unless they have collateral or a guarantor. My breath hitched 6 months ago. Evan had come to my office at Northbridge Civic Trust. He had brought lunch and a stack of papers, just some restructuring for the business liability. He had said, "It helps lower my interest rate if I have a secondary signer for stability. It is just a formality." "Mum?" I had signed 3 different documents without reading the fine print of the third one, because I trusted the tears he had cried 5 years ago. I realized then, with a clarity that felt like a physical blow, that the addendum was not for business liability. It was a cross-collateralization agreement. This house, this monument to his ego, was likely purchased using my credit rating and my retirement portfolio as the ultimate security backing. I looked at Evan, laughing as he swirled his drink. He had not invited me here to celebrate a new home. He had invited me to watch him destroy Rowan, unaware that the roof over his head was held up by the very woman he planned to discard next. This was not a housewarming. It was a coronation, and he had tricked me into buying him the crown. The noise of the party was a dull roar behind me as I slipped down the hallway. I had told Derek I was looking for the powder room, but my destination was the heavy oak door at the end of the corridor. Evan's home office. I stepped inside and closed the door softly, leaning against it for a second to steady my breathing. The room smelled of cedar and expensive leather, a scent designed to project authority. I moved to the desk. It was a chaotic mess of papers, which was uncharacteristic for Evan, who usually curated his workspace like a museum exhibit. My eyes landed on a thick folder made of navy blue cardstock. The logo embossed on the front in silver foil read Crescent Vale Holdings. This was the firm Derek Slate had been bragging about, the entity behind their so-called real estate empire. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my hands moving with the practiced speed of a woman who had spent 30 years auditing municipal budgets. I flipped the folder open. The first page was a payment schedule. I snapped a photo, then another. My internal auditor alarm began ringing immediately. The numbers were too clean. $150,000 for consulting, $80,000 for market research. In the world of legitimate finance, numbers are messy. They have cents and decimals. Nature does not produce round numbers, liars do. I turned the page and froze. There was a subfolder clipped to the back. The label was handwritten in Evan's sharp, angular script, Contingency Mom. I felt a cold flush spread across my chest. I opened it. It contained a draft email to a bank officer, referencing my retirement accounts as liquid assets available for leverage upon the completion of a power of attorney transfer. I looked closer at the bottom of the document. My signature was there, but it looked grainy. I held the phone camera close and zoomed in. The edges of the ink were pixelated. It was a copy-paste job. He had lifted my signature from the loan modification I had signed months ago and digitally grafted it onto this new authorization. I shoved the papers back into place, ensuring the edges aligned perfectly with the dust outline on the desk. I needed to get out. I returned to the party, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Evan was standing near the archway, laughing at something the realtor said. I walked up to him, keeping my face a mask of mild maternal concern. "Evan?" I said, keeping my voice low. "Rowan looks terrible. Is she all right?" He didn't even look at me. He swirled the ice in his glass, his smile tight and dismissive. "She is just dramatic. Mum, don't interfere. This is how adults handle business." He walked away before I could respond. I went to the kitchen to find water, my hands trembling with rage. Rowan was there, staring into the sink full of dirty champagne flutes. When she saw me, she flinched, then moved closer, checking over her shoulder to ensure we were alone. I don't know who to tell," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. "But you are the only person Evan creates plans for. You are the only one he fears." "Tell me," I said. "He made me sign a paper," Rowan said, tears welling in her eyes. "He said if I sign the vacate agreement and leave quietly, he won't put my name on the debt he owes Derek. He said he would ruin my credit forever if I fight him." She pulled her phone from her apron pocket. Her fingers shook as she opened a voice memo app. "He said this to me in the car before we got here," she said. She pressed play. Evan's voice cut through the air, tinny and distorted but unmistakable. "Tomorrow you go? No scenes. No crying. Tonight. You smile. I want Mom and everyone else to see you happy. Let people witness tonight to avoid trouble later. If you make me look bad, Rowan, I will bury you in litigation until you are 40. The recording ended. I stared at the phone. It was the final piece of the puzzle. Evan wasn't just kicking her out. He was staging a play. He needed me here, smiling and eating lasagna, so that when he threw her out tomorrow, he could say, "But look, even my mother saw how happy we were." Rowan just snapped. "She is unstable. I was not a guest. I was his alibi." I looked at Rowan. She was terrified, waiting for me to tell her to be a good wife, to endure it. "Wipe your face," I said, my voice steady and cold. Do not let them see you cry. Maggie. What are you going to do? She asked. I looked out at the living room, where my son was holding court, building a future on a foundation of fraud and my stolen signature. I did not feel like crying anymore. The sadness had evaporated, replaced by the icy clarity of a forensic accountant looking at an unbalanced ledger. I am going to finish the audit, I said. I am not going to make a scene. Rowan, I am going to take away his pen. I left the party 20 minutes later. I told Evan I had a migraine, which was the only lie I told that night. He barely looked up from his conversation with Derek Slate to nod at me. To him, I was just an old woman with a headache, a minor inconvenience removing itself from his stage. He had no idea that as I walked out the front door, I was not retreating. I was mobilizing. I sat in my sedan, the engine idling in the cold darkness of the Larkspur Ridge driveway. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. I pulled out my phone and dialed Gloria Penn. It was 9 o'clock on a Saturday night, but Gloria and I went back 30 years. She answered on the second ring. Maggie. Is everything okay? She asked. I need an appointment. Gloria. Tomorrow morning. The earliest slot you have. I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, devoid of the tremor that had plagued me inside the house. It is Saturday night. Mag. Can this wait until Monday? No. It involves Evan, and it involves fraud. I said. There was a pause on the line. Gloria shifted gears instantly. 8 o'clock. Bring everything you have. I drove home in silence. The road stretched out before me, not as a journey, but as a checklist. When I entered my house, my paid-off, modest bungalow that smelled of lavender and old books, I did not collapse on the sofa. I went straight to the master bedroom closet. I pushed aside the winter coats and knelt before the fireproof safe bolted to the floor. I spun the dial, right to 14, left to 28, right to 7. The heavy door clicked open. I dug through the files until I found the folder labeled Evan, Loan Support. I pulled out the document I had signed 6 months ago. Evan had called it a minor addendum to help him restructure some credit card debt. I sat on the floor and turned on the overhead light, reading every single word of the fine print I had previously skimmed. It was not a restructuring agreement. It was a limited guarantee with a cascading liability clause. It meant that while I was not the primary borrower, my assets could be seized if the primary borrower Evan defaulted and could not cover the difference. I felt a cold sweat prickle my hairline. He had exposed me to hundreds of thousands of dollars in liability. I stood up and marched to my home office. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank portal. My fingers flew across the keys. I went to the checking account I had shared with Evan since he was 16, a joint account I used to transfer his allowance during college. I had kept it open for emergencies, keeping only a minimum balance there. I gasped. The balance was not $500. It was $0. I clicked on the transaction history. 3 days ago, $500 had been transferred out to an account ending in 449. That was Evan's personal account. But it wasn't just the 500. I checked the linked savings account, my primary emergency fund. There was a pending transfer request for $10,000 initiated yesterday. He was testing the pipes. He was seeing if the connection was still live before he drained the reservoir. You stupid, greedy boy, I whispered to the empty room. I did not cry. I worked. I hit cancel on the pending transfer. Then I went to the security settings. I removed Evan's name from the joint account. I changed my username. I changed my password to a string of 20 random characters. I set up two-factor authentication to ping my phone for any transaction over $1. I was cutting off his oxygen supply, click by click. I called the bank's 24-hour fraud line to place a hard lock on my credit inquiries. The representative, a young man named Jason, sounded tired but helpful. Okay. Mrs. Holston, I have flagged the accounts. No transfers without verbal confirmation, Jason said. Oh, and do you want to proceed with the competency review request that was logged earlier? What froze? My hand gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Excuse me. What review? There is a note here on your file from yesterday, Jason said, the clicking of his keyboard audible in the background. A third-party inquiry asking for the procedure to freeze assets pending a medical competency evaluation. It lists a Mr. Evan Holston as the concerned relative. The room seemed to tilt. This was not just about money. Evan wasn't just trying to steal from me. He was preparing to erase me. He wanted to paint me as senile, a confused old woman who couldn't be trusted with her own checkbook, so he could step in as my legal guardian and funnel my life savings into his real estate gambling. Mrs. Holston, are you still there? Jason asked. I took a deep breath. The air in my lungs felt like ice. I am here. Jason? I said, my voice sharp and clear. Cancel that request. And note in the file that I am fully aware of who is trying to rob me. I will be down there on Monday with a lawyer. I hung up the phone. I looked at the screen, at the accounts I had spent a lifetime building. Evan wanted a war. He thought I was a helpless old woman he could discard like his wife. He was about to learn that he didn't get his talent for calculation from his father. He got it from me. Sunday morning, sunlight hit the mahogany table in Gloria Penn's office, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but I felt only a deep, penetrating chill. I laid the printed photos of the Crescent Vale Holdings documents and the grainy copy of the loan addendum between us. Gloria adjusted her glasses, her face hardening as she read. She did not look like my old friend in that moment. She looked like the shark she was known to be in court. Maggie. This is not just sloppy paperwork, Gloria said, tapping a red fingernail on the addendum. This is signature misappropriation. And this email draft about your competency, he is building a case to take conservatorship over you. If we file a motion now, we can freeze any accounts associated with this addendum and flag the bank for fraud. I stared at the papers. My hands were in my lap, twisting the strap of my purse. He is my son. Gloria. If I file this, he could go to jail or lose his license. He is trying to steal your life. Maggie. Gloria shot back, her voice sharp. He is not acting like a son. He is acting like a predator. I closed my eyes. I wanted to defend him. I wanted to remember the boy who brought me dandelion bouquets. But all I could see was his face the night before, raising that glass of champagne while his wife trembled beside him. To my wife, who is moving out tomorrow. That cruelty was not an accident. It was a character trait. Do it, I whispered. But not the criminal charges yet, just the freeze. Block him. I pulled out my phone. I needed to secure the other victim in this mess. I texted Rowan. I kept it brief and devoid of emotion, knowing Evan might check her phone. Do not sign anything. Tonight, you stay safe. Keep your head down. Meet me at Gloria's office tomorrow at 9. The reply came 3 minutes later. He says he has photos, private ones. He says if I don't leave by noon, he will send them to my boss and my parents. I am scared. Maggie. Rage, hot and blinding, flared in my chest. Blackmail. He was blackmailing his own wife with revenge porn. Gloria, I said, my voice trembling with fury. We need a place for Rowan. Tonight. Somewhere he cannot find her. Gloria nodded, already reaching for her landline. My paralegal has a guest cottage in Boulder. Unlisted address. I will arrange the transport. Evan won't know she is gone until she is halfway up the canyon. Just then, my cell phone buzzed. The screen flashed Evan. I looked at Gloria. She held up a hand, signaling me to answer but to be careful. I took a deep breath, forcing my heart rate to slow, forcing my voice to pitch up into the register of a tired, slightly confused mother. Hello? Evan? I answered. Mum, hey? His voice was smooth, dripping with synthetic warmth. I didn't see you leave last night. Are you feeling better? The headache gone. Oh, it is still lingering. Honey, I said, rubbing my temple as if he could see me. I just needed to lie down. It was a lovely party, though. Yeah, it was great. Listen, Mom, I feel bad bothering you on a Sunday, but the bank just called. Apparently, that restructuring paperwork we did has a tiny error. Just a missing initial. He lied. The ease with which he did it was terrifying. I am going to email you a PDF. Can you just digitally sign it and send it back? It will save me a trip across town. I looked at Gloria. She was typing furiously on her laptop, monitoring my email inbox. I am not good with the digital signatures. Evan, you know that, I stammered, playing the part he had written for me. It is easy. Mum, just click the box, please. It holds up the refinancing if we don't do it today. You want to help me? Right, of course I want to help, I said. Send it over. I will. I will try to open it. Thanks. Mum, you're the best. Love you too, I said, and the words tasted like ash. I hung up. A moment later, a ping sounded from Gloria's laptop. She opened the file Evan had just sent. She scanned it, and her eyes widened. She turned the screen toward me. It was not a bank form. It was not a loan correction. Look at the header. Maggie, Gloria said, her voice dropping to a whisper. It read, General Durable Power of Attorney. If you had clicked that box, Gloria said, you would have granted him full authority to sell your house, access your retirement funds, and make medical decisions on your behalf. He wasn't fixing a loan. Maggie, he was handing himself the keys to your entire existence. I stared at the screen. The betrayal was absolute. There was no going back now. The boy I raised was dead. The man on the phone was a thief. Don't reply, I said, my voice hardening into steel. Let him think I am struggling to open the file. Let him think he has won. Tomorrow, we introduce him to reality. I spent Monday afternoon in front of my vanity mirror, but I was not applying makeup to look younger. I was doing the opposite. I skipped the concealer I usually wore to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I chose a cardigan that was slightly too large, making my frame appear shrunken and frail. I practiced a tremor in my right hand, holding a teacup until the china rattled against the saucer. If Evan wanted a confused, incompetent mother to fit his narrative, I would give him an Oscar-worthy performance. I called him at 2:00. Evan, I said, letting my voice trail off into a weak, airy whisper. I looked at the file, but the words are so small. I don't want to make a mistake. Can you come over tonight? Bring Mr. Slate and your lawyer friend. I want to make sure I am doing the right thing for the family. Of course. Mom, he replied, the triumph audible in his voice. He did not hear a mother asking for clarity. He heard a surrender. We will be there at 7. I will walk you through everything. He brought them all. It was a grotesque reenactment of the party. Derek Slate walked in with a bottle of wine, looking around my modest living room with veiled contempt. The realtor and the lawyer friend followed, chatting loudly. They thought they were attending a closing ceremony, the final signature that would unlock my assets for their use. They did not expect the other guests. When Rowan walked in from the kitchen, followed by Gloria Penn, the room went quiet. Evan's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered his mask. Rowan, I thought you were packing, Evan said, his voice tight. I am here to listen. Evan, Rowan said softly. She sat next to Gloria, placing her phone on the coffee table. The recording app was already running, the red light pulsing like a heartbeat. I sat in my high-backed armchair at the head of the room. On the table before me lay a single manila folder. It contained the timeline of transactions, the printed emails, the forged addendum, and the transcript of Rowan's recording. It was not thick, but it was heavy. Mom, why is she here? Evan asked, gesturing to Gloria with a dismissive wave. This is a family matter. Gloria is family, I said, my voice intentionally low and shaky. I feel so overwhelmed. Evan, the numbers get all jumbled in my head lately. Evan sighed. A loud, theatrical exhalation designed to signal his patience to the room. He turned to Derek and the others, offering a sympathetic shrug. You see what I mean? Evan said to them, lowering his voice to a stage whisper that everyone could hear. She has been like this for months, forgetting dates, mixing up accounts. It is really sad to watch. That is why I need the power of attorney, just to make sure the bills get paid. I watched him. I watched my son paint a portrait of my decline to justify his theft. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, not from heart failure, but from heartbreak. But I pushed it down. I was not destroying my son. I was destroying the system he had built to consume people like me and Rowan. I let the silence stretch. I stared at him, blinking slowly. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. The air in the room grew thick and uncomfortable. The realtor shifted in her seat. The lawyer cleared his throat. Evan's smile began to twitch. Mum? Evan prompted, pushing the power of attorney document toward me. Just sign here, and we can all have some wine. I stopped shaking my hand. I sat up straighter, the frailty evaporating from my posture. I looked him dead in the eye. If I am so forgetful. Evan, I said, my voice suddenly clear, cold, and razor-sharp. Then perhaps we should check the papers to remind me. I opened the folder, Derek Slate, clearly bored by the theatrics and eager to secure his funding, let out a short, arrogant laugh. He did not notice the shift in the atmosphere. Come on. Evan, wrap it up, Derek said, checking his watch. It is just like the zoning board deal. You confuse them with the fine print, apply the pressure, and boom. You have a way to make Mum sign fast. Let's get this done so we can celebrate. The room froze. Derek stopped smiling as he realized everyone was looking at him. He had just admitted, in front of witnesses and a recording device, that this was a premeditated strategy to coerce a signature. "Thank you, Mr. Slate," I said, sliding a printed email across the table toward him. "I believe you just confirmed the conspiracy charge." Derek's laughter died in his throat as the email landed on the table. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, pressing down on everyone like a physical weight. I didn't look at him. My eyes were fixed on Evan. I reached into the folder and pulled out the printout of the general durable power of attorney he had sent me just 24 hours ago. I laid it next to the forged addendum. "You sent this to me yesterday," I said, my voice steady, stripped of the frailty I had worn moments before. "You told me it was a loan correction. You told me it was a missing initial. But it wasn't. Was it?" Evan shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. "Mum, you are confusing things. It is just legal boilerplate. You don't understand the terminology. I understand that a durable power of attorney gives you the right to liquidate my retirement account," I countered. "I understand that it lets you sell my house without my permission." I leaned forward. "So answer me this. In front of your friends. Do you want to control my money, or do you want me to be safe?" Evan looked around the room. He saw doubt creeping into the faces of his realtor and his lawyer friend. He laughed, a short, nervous sound. "This is ridiculous. I am trying to protect you. You are getting older. You forget things." "Stop," Gloria Penn cut in. Her voice was not loud, but it commanded the room. She adjusted her glasses and looked directly at Evan's lawyer. "Counselor, you and I both know that coercing a signature from a senior citizen under false pretenses, specifically misrepresenting the nature of a legal document, is fraud. If you proceed with this filing, I will report it to the Bar Association, and if you touch her accounts, I will file for elder abuse." Evan's face flushed a deep, ugly red. "You have no right to come into my mother's house and threaten me. This is a family dispute." "Is it?" Rowan spoke up. Her hands were trembling, but she didn't look down. She pressed play on her phone. The recording filled the room again. Evan's voice, arrogant and cruel. "Tomorrow you go. No scenes, no crying. If you make me look bad. Rowan, I will bury you in litigation until you are 40. The room went deathly quiet. The realtor looked at the floor, suddenly finding her shoes very interesting. The neighbor who had laughed at the toast the night before covered her mouth. The mask of the successful, loving husband cracked and fell away, leaving something ugly underneath. Evan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. He pointed a shaking finger at Rowan. "She is unstable," he shouted, his composure shattering. She has been having episodes. She is paranoid. I was trying to get her out of the house for her own good." She made that recording out of context. Rowan didn't scream back. She didn't cry. She simply reached into her bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. She slid it across the table to the lawyer friend. "The vacate notice draft," Rowan said quietly. "Dated 3 weeks ago. If I am so unstable..." "Evan, why did your lawyer draft a eviction notice before I even knew we were having problems?" The lawyer friend looked at the document, then at Evan. He closed his briefcase. "Evan? You didn't tell me about this." I stood up slowly. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. "You used me," I said. "You invited me to that dinner not to celebrate, but to witness. You wanted your mother to smile while you destroyed your wife. Did you really think I would stand by you just because your last name is Holston? Evan turned on me. The vein in his forehead was throbbing. He looked trapped, cornered by his own lies. You should stand by me, he screamed, the sound echoing off the walls. You owe me. You owe me for everything. I owe you. I asked. Baffled. You owe me for Dad. He spat the words out like venom. You think I don't know? He was miserable. He worked himself to death because of you. You nagged him. You pushed him. And he died trying to pay for your life. You owe me a father. And since you can't give me that, you owe me everything else. The accusation hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I stopped breathing for a second. The room seemed to spin. My husband, Frank, had died of a heart attack on a construction site. We had been happy. We had struggled, yes, but we loved each other. But Evan had rewritten history. He had invented a narrative where he was the victim of a tragic childhood, where his father was a martyr and his mother was the villain. He had used this lie to justify every selfish, cruel thing he had ever done. He didn't just want my money, he felt entitled to it as reparations. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I willed them back. I would not give him that satisfaction. Is that what you tell yourself? I asked softly. That I killed him. I know it. Evan sneered. He told me. He used to say he was tired of you. I walked over to the bookshelf where I had placed my purse. I pulled out a small, worn envelope. The paper was yellowed with age. Your father left a letter, I said. It was in his locker at the site. The foreman gave it to me the day he died. I saved it for you, for when you were ready. I held it out. Evan stared at it. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. I tried to give it to you when you graduated college. I continued. And again, when you got married, you refused to read it. You said you didn't need his pity. But the truth is, you were afraid. You were afraid to know that he wasn't a martyr. I don't want your lies, Evan hissed. It is not my handwriting. Evan, I said, dropping the envelope onto the table in front of him. It is his. And deep down, you know why you haven't read it. Because if you read it, you can't be the victim anymore. And if you aren't the victim, then you are just a thief. The yellowed envelope sat on the table between us like a grenade that had been waiting 10 years to explode. Evan stared at it. He knew his father's handwriting, the sharp, slanted loop of the letters, the way he pressed the pen down hard on the paper. I did not open it. I did not need to. I had memorized every word the night Frank died, sitting alone in a hospital waiting room that smelled of antiseptic and cold coffee. He didn't write about how hard I worked him. I said, my voice quiet but filling the room. He wrote that he was terrified. Evan. He wrote, I am scared the boy wants the fruit without planting the tree. He looks at honest work like it is a punishment. Don't let him find the easy way. Maggie, or the easy way will eat him alive. Evan went pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. For 30 years, he had wrapped himself in the warm blanket of victimhood, telling himself his father was a martyr who hated me. In 1 second, I had stripped that blanket away. He was shivering in the cold light of the truth his father hadn't been a victim of my ambition. He had been afraid of Evan's greed. While Evan sat frozen, the machinery of justice began to grind. Gloria Penn was typing furiously on her laptop, the click-clack of the keys sounding like gunfire in the silent room. I have just sent a formal notice of dispute to First National and the title company, Gloria announced, not looking up. I have flagged the signature on the addendum as fraudulent. I have also copied the fraud division of the State Attorney General's office on the Crescent Vale Holdings file. If any money moves from Maggie's accounts tonight, it will trigger an immediate freeze. Derek Slate stood up. His arrogant slouch was gone. He looked like a rat, sensing the ship was taking on water. I have to take this call, Derek muttered, grabbing his coat. He didn't look at Evan. He didn't look at me. He walked out the front door without closing it, leaving a draft of cold air swirling around our ankles. But in his haste, he had left a single sheet of paper on the coffee table, a printout he had been reviewing when he sat down. I picked it up. It was an email thread between him and Evan, dated 2 days ago. Transfer the assets to the mother's name immediately. The email read, "If the SEC looks at Crescent Vale, we need a clean layer. If she goes down for the tax liability, she goes down. She is old. A jury will just think she is confused." My stomach turned over. This wasn't just unethical. This was a federal crime. Evan wasn't just stealing my money. He was setting me up to be the fall guy for a financial scheme that could land me in prison for 20 years. "You were going to frame me," I whispered, looking at my son. "You weren't just taking the house. You were handing me a prison sentence." Evan didn't answer. He was staring at the spot where Derek had been sitting, realizing he had been abandoned. Suddenly, my cell phone rang. It was a blocked number. I answered, putting it on speaker. "Mrs. Holston," a woman's voice asked, crisp and bureaucratic. "This is Sarah from the Department of Human Services, Adult Protective Services. We received a priority report regarding your welfare. The report states you are currently being held against your will and are suffering from acute cognitive decline. We have an officer on the way to perform a wellness check." Evan's head snapped up. He looked genuinely confused. "I didn't call them yet," he whispered, panic edging into his voice. I was waiting until you signed." I looked at the phone, then at the room. If Evan hadn't made the call, who had? The report was detailed. It mentioned acute cognitive decline, a specific medical phrase. My eyes landed on the lawyer friend sitting on the sofa. He was sweating. He was tapping his phone against his knee, his eyes darting toward the door. "Gloria," I said, pointing at the man. "Ask him for his phone." The lawyer froze. "You filed the report," I said, the realization hitting me like a slap. "You filed it 30 minutes ago, when you realized I wasn't signing. You wanted the police to come here, see a confused old woman shouting about conspiracies, and take me into protective custody. That would have given you 48 hours to access the accounts while I was locked up in a psych ward." Rowan stood up, her face white with shock. She looked at the lawyer, then at her husband. "You people are monsters," she breathed. "You aren't businessmen. You are vultures. I am requesting a voluntary competency evaluation immediately," I told the woman on the phone, my voice iron hard. "And I am currently sitting with my attorney. The police are welcome to come. I have a room full of people I would love for them to meet." The fluorescent lights of the medical clinic hummed with a low, irritating buzz that seemed to drill into my temples. But I sat perfectly still. This was the final hoop. Dr. Aris, a neurologist with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, set his clipboard down on the metal desk. The sound echoed in the small room. He looked at me, then at the clock, and finally offered a small, professional smile. "Margaret, you scored 30 out of 30, he said, tapping the paper with his pen. "Your recall is excellent. Your cognitive processing is faster than mine on most days. I am signing the affidavit now. You are fully competent, and any claim to the contrary is medically baseless." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 48 hours. "Thank you. Doctor, I need that paper to be bulletproof." "It is," he assured me. "I am also noting that the request for this evaluation appeared punitive. That will help your lawyer." I walked out of that office, clutching the folder like a shield. Gloria Penn was waiting in her car at the curb. When I handed her the affidavit, she didn't smile. She just nodded, her eyes dangerous behind her glasses. "Good," Gloria said, sliding the document into her briefcase. "Now we play offense. I am drafting a complaint for abuse of process against Evan's lawyer. He filed a false report with Adult Protective Services to gain leverage in a financial dispute. He won't just lose this case. Maggie, he might lose his license to practice law." When I got home, the sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across my lawn. Evan's car was in my driveway. He was sitting on my front steps, his head in his hands. He looked terrible. His suit was rumpled, his tie missing, and he smelled faintly of stale scotch. When he heard my footsteps, he looked up. His eyes were red, brimming with tears. For a split second, my heart lurched. It was the same look he had when he was 6 and scraped his knee. But then he spoke, and the illusion shattered. "Mom, please." He choked out, standing up unsteadily. "You have to stop, Gloria. You have to stop the bank inquiry." "I didn't start the inquiry." "Evan," I said, standing on the sidewalk, refusing to let him close the distance. "You did. When you forged my signature." "It was a technicality," he cried, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "I was going to pay it back. But if the bank pulls the loan now, I lose the house. I lose everything. And your name is on the guarantee. Mom, if I go down, you go down with me. They will take your savings. They will take this house. Do you want to be homeless at 58 just to prove a point?" He was crying. But the tears were tactical. He wasn't appealing to my love. He was appealing to my fear. I looked at him, feeling a profound, hollow ache in my chest. "I have a question for you, Evan, and I want the truth." He nodded frantically. "Anything. Just tell them to stop." "Are you crying because you humiliated Rowan and betrayed your mother?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts. "Or are you crying because you are terrified of being poor?" Evan froze. His mouth opened, then closed. He blinked, searching for the right answer, the one that would unlock the door. I am crying because we are family," he stammered. "Because we shouldn't let outsiders like the bank ruin us." He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say he was wrong. He only cared about the asset. "Go home." "Evan," I said, walking past him to my front door. "I would rather be homeless with my integrity than live in a castle built on fraud." I locked the deadbolt behind me and leaned against the door, listening to his car peel away. My phone buzzed. It was Rowan. Maggie. Her voice was small. "I got my papers. The police escorted me. He had locked my passport and birth certificate in his gun safe. He told me he lost them months ago. He was keeping me trapped." Maggie. "He wanted to make sure I couldn't leave the state if I ever tried to run." You are free now, I told her. Focus on that. You are free. The next morning, the mail brought the first tremor of the earthquake I had triggered. A letter from the bank's fraud department arrived, addressed to me. It stated that due to irregularities regarding digital signature authentication, the loan was under immediate review, and all related accounts were frozen pending an investigation. They requested an interview with Evan and all involved parties. My phone pinged again, a text from a number I didn't save, but I knew. Derek Slate. Small towns talk. Maggie. Reputation is a fragile thing. Be careful what stories you spread about my business. Accidents happen to credit scores and reputations every day. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot and emailed it to Gloria with the subject line, "Evidence of intimidation." Then, I sat at my kitchen table with the guest list I had stolen from the party. I began to dial. I didn't call to gossip. I didn't call to complain. "Hello, Mrs. Gable." "This is Maggie Holston," I said calmly to the first neighbour. "I am not asking for sympathy. I am simply informing you that there is an active legal investigation regarding the events of Saturday night. I am asking if you would be willing to provide a statement regarding the toast Evan made and the conversation you witnessed." Most were hesitant. People hate conflict. But I kept dialing. Then, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Arthur Vance. I hesitated. Arthur was the wealthy owner of a chain of car dealerships. He was the one who had laughed the loudest at Evan's joke about kicking Rowan out. I braced myself for a lecture on minding my own business. "Mrs. Holston." Arthur's voice boomed, deep and gravelly. "Mr. Vance," I said, keeping my voice cool. "If you are calling to tell me to stop, I am calling to tell you I have files." He interrupted. I paused. "Excuse me." I laughed because I was uncomfortable. "Maggie." "I didn't know the boy was serious," Arthur said, his tone shifting to something darker, angrier. "But I heard you were going after Derek Slate. 2 years ago, Slate sold me a commercial property package, guaranteed returns," he said. "It was a shell game. I lost $40,000. My lawyers said it wasn't enough to sue over without looking like a fool." He paused, and I could hear the rustle of papers on his end. "But if you are building a case, if you have proof he is conspiring with your son to commit fraud," Arthur continued, "then I am not just a witness. Maggie, I am a plaintiff. I have emails where Slate uses the exact same language he used on you. I want in." I gripped the phone, feeling the tide turn. I wasn't just a mother fighting a son anymore. I was the spark that was about to burn Derek Slate's entire world down. "Bring the emails?" "Arthur," I said. "Gloria Penn will be expecting you." The conference room at the downtown branch of First National was cold, silent, and smelled of lemon polish and impending doom. We sat around a massive oval table. On one side sat Evan, his lawyer, and a visibly sweating Derek Slate. On the other side sat me, Gloria Penn, and Rowan. At the head of the table sat the bank's internal fraud investigator, a man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he had not smiled since 1995. I did not scream. I did not throw water in anyone's face. I simply slid the blue folder across the mahogany surface. It stopped right in front of Mr. Henderson. "This contains the affidavit from Dr. Aris, confirming my full cognitive competency," I said, my voice steady. "It also contains a timeline of unauthorized access attempts to my accounts, initiated by my son's device. and a copy of the fraudulent power of attorney document he attempted to trick me into signing under the guise of a loan correction. Evan's lawyer reached for the file, but Mr. Henderson put a heavy hand over it. "We have already reviewed the digital logs, Mrs. Halston," Henderson said, looking at Evan. "The IP address matches, and the metadata on the document confirms it was altered." Evan shrank in his chair. He looked like a child caught stealing from the collection plate. It was a misunderstanding. I was trying to streamline the refinancing. Rowan spoke up. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the air like a knife. She placed her phone on the table. "Is that what you call this?" She played the recording one last time. "Tomorrow you go. If you make me look bad, I will bury you." Then she laid the vacate notice draft next to it. He wasn't streamlining a loan. He was financing my eviction with his mother's life savings. The room felt heavy as stone. Derek Slate tried to stand up. "Look, this is clearly a domestic dispute. I have meetings to get to. My company." "Sit down, Mr. Slate," Mr. Henderson said. He didn't raise his voice, but the command was absolute. "We received a package of emails this morning from a Mr. Arthur Vance. They outline a pattern of predatory lending and asset stripping that matches the activity we are seeing here. Our fraud division has already forwarded the file to the district attorney. You aren't going to any meetings." Derek slumped back down. The color drained from his face. The tycoon who had strutted around my son's party was gone. In his place was a man watching his life implode. Gloria pushed a document toward Evan. "This is a binding agreement. It states that you will make no further contact with Maggie regarding financial matters. It permanently revokes your access to any family trust. And it acknowledges that any further attempt to leverage her assets will result in immediate prosecution." Evan looked at the paper. He looked at Derek, who was staring at the floor. He looked at his lawyer, who refused to meet his eyes. Finally, he looked at me. "Mom," he whispered, "if I sign this, the house, the deal, it all falls apart. I will be bankrupt." "You were bankrupt a long time ago, Evan," I said. "You just kept spending my money to hide it." He signed. The scratch of the pen was the only sound in the room. Rowan stood up. She looked taller, stronger. "I am filing for divorce this afternoon." "Evan, I am not asking for alimony. I don't want your money. I just want my name off your debts. I am taking my life back." She walked out without looking back. A woman who had walked through fire and come out clean. As the meeting adjourned and the lawyers began packing their briefcases, Evan remained seated. He looked hollowed out. I stood up and reached into my purse. I pulled out the thick, cream-coloured envelope I had brought to the party 2 nights ago, the blessing I had originally intended to give him. I placed it in front of him. "You thought this was a check?" I said softly. He looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. He tore it open. Inside was not a check. It was a formal legal notice indicating the transfer of my entire estate into an irrevocable trust managed by a third party, designated for my long-term care and eventual donation to charity. And clipped to, it was a handwritten note. "What is this?" Evan asked, his voice trembling. "It is the end of the Bank of Mom," I said. "It is a notification that I have removed myself as your safety net, but read the last clause." He read it aloud, his voice breaking. "Reconciliation may be considered only after the beneficiary completes 1 year of certified therapy and makes a full, public apology to Rowan Halston in the presence of the original witnesses. You, "You can't be serious," Evan stammered. "You are cutting me off after everything." I leaned in close. The room was empty now, save for us and the ghosts of the relationship we used to have. "You used a celebration to kick a woman out of her home," I said, my voice calm and final. "Today, I am using the truth to kick cruelty out of my life." Evan put his head on the table and began to sob. It wasn't the tactical crying of yesterday. It was the terrified sound of a man who realized that for the first time in his life, there was no one coming to clean up his mess. I turned around. I walked out of the bank and into the bright, cold sunlight. I walked to my car, got in, and for the first time in years, I didn't check my phone to see if my son needed me. I started the engine and drove away, leaving the rearview mirror and him behind. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I really want to know where you guys are tuning in from. Drop a comment below with your city or country. Let's see how far this family drama has travelled. And if you enjoyed Maggie's journey of taking her power back, please make sure to subscribe to the Grandma's Family Diary channel. Smash that like button and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more people. See you in the next video.